My mother-in-law's attempt to rule my marriage backfired spectacularly. You won't want to miss the twist. I thought my wedding day would be perfect. The church was decorated with white roses, sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, and Mark looked handsome in his black tuxedo. But as I walked down the aisle, I noticed Dorothy, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, whispering urgently to the pastor. My heart sank when she stepped forward during our vow exchange. "Excuse me," Dorothy announced loudly, her voice echoing through the church. "I think the vows should include a promise to honor family traditions." The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mark's face turned red with embarrassment. I stood there in my white dress, bouquet trembling in my hands, watching Dorothy try to rewrite our sacred moment. The pastor looked confused, glancing between us. "Mrs. Thompson, this isn't," he began. "It's fine," I whispered, forcing a smile. But inside, I felt my perfect day crumbling. Dorothy beamed triumphantly, as if she'd just saved our marriage before it even began. Mark squeezed my hand apologetically. We continued with the original vows, but the damage was done. Every guest had witnessed Dorothy's first attempt to control our marriage. As we kissed, sealing our union, I caught Dorothy's satisfied expression. She thought she'd won something. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of our war. At the reception, Dorothy cornered me near the cake table. She wore a navy dress that was suspiciously similar to wedding colors, and her smile felt predatory. "Ella, dear, now that you're family, I should share some wisdom about managing a household." She launched into a detailed explanation of how she'd run her home for 30 years. "Mark expects dinner at 6 sharp, she said, cutting herself a large slice of cake. "He likes his shirts pressed with starch and never use fabric softener on his work clothes." I nodded politely, but my stomach churned. Other guests mingled around us, laughing and celebrating, while Dorothy treated me like a new employee receiving training. "Marriage requires sacrifice," she continued. "I gave up my career to support my husband properly." Mark appeared beside us, wrapping his arm around my waist. "Mom, what are you telling my beautiful wife?" His tone was light, but I sensed tension underneath. "Just sharing some helpful tips," Dorothy replied sweetly. "Ella will need guidance adjusting to married life." She patted my arm condescendingly. Mark kissed my temple. "Ella's perfect, just as she is." But I noticed he didn't contradict his mother's suggestions. That small detail stuck with me as we danced our first dance, Dorothy watching from the sidelines with calculating eyes. Our honeymoon in Hawaii was blissful. For 10 days, I forgot about Dorothy's interference. Mark and I explored beaches, tried local restaurants, and talked about our future. We dreamed about starting a family and maybe buying a bigger house. But the moment we returned home, my phone started ringing. Dorothy called every morning at 8:30 sharp. "Good morning, dear. I thought I'd check how you're settling in." Her voice was cheerful but persistent. She had opinions about everything. My coffee was too strong. My curtains were the wrong color. My grocery choices were inefficient. "You should shop at Peterson's Market," she advised. "They have better produce, and Mrs. Henderson works there. She's a family friend." When I mentioned wanting to paint the bedroom a soft blue, Dorothy gasped dramatically. "Oh no, dear. Mark hates blue. It reminds him of his childhood bedroom, which made him sad." I'd never heard this from Mark himself. Each call chipped away at my confidence. I started second-guessing simple decisions, wondering if Dorothy was right. Maybe I didn't know my own husband well enough. Maybe I was making mistakes that would damage our marriage. Mark noticed my growing anxiety, but dismissed it. "Mom means well," he'd say. "She just wants to help." The tension between Mark and me grew like a slow-burning fuse. We'd have silent arguments across the dinner table, communicating through loaded glances and careful word choices. He couldn't understand why Dorothy's daily calls bothered me so much. "She raised me successfully," Mark said one evening, washing dishes while I dried. "Her advice comes from experience." His defensive tone made my chest tighten. "But I'm not you," I replied quietly. "I need to find my own way of doing things." Mark's jaw clenched, and he scrubbed a plate harder than necessary. Dorothy's influence crept into every corner of our lives. She'd mentioned how Mark's ex-girlfriend used to cook his favorite meals, or how disappointed she was that we hadn't visited her church yet. Mark would relay these comments casually, not realizing how they stung. I felt like I was competing with an invisible standard set by Dorothy's expectations and Mark's past. Every choice I made was measured against what Dorothy would do or what Mark was used to. One night, I found Mark texting his mother after we'd had a small disagreement about weekend plans. "What are you telling her?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. "Nothing important," he mumbled, putting his phone away. But I'd seen enough to know he was sharing our private moments with Dorothy. 3 months after our wedding, we discovered I was pregnant. Mark spun me around our kitchen, both of us laughing with joy. We called our families immediately, sharing the incredible news. Dorothy's reaction was explosive enthusiasm. "Oh, wonderful. I'll come stay with you during the pregnancy. You'll need proper guidance, especially for your first baby." My smile froze on my face. "That's really generous, Mrs. Thompson, but we'll be fine," I said carefully. Mark was still grinning, not catching my panic. "Nonsense," Dorothy declared. "I have experience with babies. I know what to expect. I'll pack my things and be there next week." The line went dead before I could protest. Mark noticed my pale face. "What's wrong? Aren't you excited about Mom helping?" His innocent question made my heart sink. "I thought we'd handle this together," I whispered. "Just us." Mark's expression shifted to confusion, then mild irritation. "Ella, this is our first baby. Mom knows what she's doing. It would be stupid to refuse help." His words hit like slaps. Stupid. That's what he thought of my desire for independence. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, one hand on my still flat belly, wondering how I'd protect my growing family from Dorothy's overwhelming presence. Dorothy moved into our guest room with 3 suitcases and a box of baby books from the 1980s. She immediately began reorganizing our home for safety. She moved cleaning supplies to higher shelves and installed cabinet locks we didn't need yet. During a family dinner at Mark's sister's house, Dorothy held court at the head of the table, dispensing pregnancy advice like a medical expert. "Ella shouldn't lift anything heavier than 5 pounds, she announced, "and no spicy foods. They cause heartburn." Mark's sister, Patricia, raised an eyebrow. "Actually, modern doctors say—" "I raised 3 healthy children," Dorothy interrupted. "I know what works." She turned to me with a patronizing smile. "You'll thank me when you have an easy pregnancy." I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I've been reading current pregnancy guides," I said softly. "My doctor says moderate exercise and normal activities are fine." Dorothy laughed dismissively. "Doctors today are too permissive. In my day, we knew how to protect our babies properly." The entire table fell silent. Mark reached for my hand under the table, but his grip felt more like a warning than comfort. Patricia shot me a sympathetic look. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried silently, wondering if I'd ever have a voice in my own pregnancy. I called my best friend Amanda from a coffee shop downtown, desperate for someone who'd understand my situation. "I feel like I'm disappearing," I confessed, stirring my decaf latte nervously. Amanda listened as I described Dorothy's constant interference and Mark's inability to see the problem. "She's living in your house, Ella. That's not normal for newlyweds." "Mark thinks I'm being ungrateful," I said, my voice cracking. "Maybe I am. Maybe I should appreciate the help." Amanda's expression hardened. "Help is when someone asks what you need and respects your answer. This sounds like control." Her words hit me like a revelation. We sat in comfortable silence while I processed this truth. Dorothy wasn't helping, she was taking over. Every suggestion was actually a command disguised as advice. "What should I do?" I asked, feeling lost and overwhelmed. Amanda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Set boundaries. You're the mother of this baby, not her. You get to make the decisions." Her confidence gave me a spark of hope. I drove home with Amanda's words echoing in my mind. But as I pulled into our driveway and saw Dorothy's car parked beside Mark's, my newfound determination wavered. Setting boundaries was easier said than done. That evening, Mark found me in our bedroom, holding a pregnancy book. "Mom told me about your coffee date," he said, sitting on the bed's edge. "She's worried you're stressed." I looked up, surprised. "She's worried I'm stressed?" "Mark, she's the reason I'm stressed." My voice rose slightly. Mark's face softened and he pulled me into his arms. "I know this is overwhelming, but Mom just wants what's best for us. She loves you." His words were gentle, but they felt like a betrayal. "I need you to support me." I whispered against his chest. "This is our baby, our marriage. I need to know you're on my side." "Of course I'm on your side," Mark said, kissing the top of my head. "We're a team." For a moment, I felt reassured. But later that night, I heard Mark's voice through the thin walls, talking to Dorothy in the kitchen. I crept closer and caught fragments, just hormones and needs time to adjust. My heart shattered. Mark was discussing our private conversation with his mother, reducing my legitimate concerns to pregnancy hormones. I realized that while Mark claimed to support me, his loyalty still belonged to Dorothy. I climbed back into bed, feeling more alone than ever, even with my husband sleeping beside me. The next morning, I discovered Dorothy had completely rearranged my kitchen. My coffee mugs were in different cabinets, my spices were alphabetized, and my favorite wooden cutting board was nowhere to be found. "I organized everything properly," Dorothy announced proudly when I came downstairs. "Much more efficient this way." She was wearing one of my aprons, making breakfast in my kitchen like she owned it. Something inside me snapped. "This is my kitchen," I said firmly. "I need my things where I put them." Dorothy's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Oh dear, you're being territorial. That's normal during pregnancy, but you should fight those impulses." Her condescending tone made my blood boil. "I'm not being territorial. I'm being reasonable. This is my home." My voice grew stronger with each word. Dorothy's expression shifted from surprise to hurt. "I was just trying to help. I didn't realize you were so ungrateful." Tears appeared in her eyes, and I felt a stab of guilt. Mark appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between us. "Your wife is upset about my organizing," Dorothy said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. I watched Mark's face, hoping he'd understand my position. Instead, he sighed deeply and looked at me with disappointment. "Ella, she was just trying to help," Mark said after Dorothy had retreated to her room, claiming to be too hurt to eat breakfast. "Now she's upset, and you're upset. Was it worth it?" I stared at my husband in disbelief. "Are you serious right now? She completely rearranged my kitchen without asking. How is that helping?" Mark ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. "Mom has been taking care of homes for decades. Maybe her way is better." His words felt like a punch to my stomach. "So my way is wrong?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark's silence was answer enough. That afternoon, Dorothy emerged from her room with red-rimmed eyes, playing the wounded victim perfectly. Mark hovered around her, bringing tea and apologizing for the misunderstanding. I spent the day in our bedroom, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Every time I heard Mark's gentle voice, comforting his mother, my heart broke a little more. That evening, Mark came to bed without mentioning the incident. He kissed my forehead and said, "Good night," as if nothing had happened. I lay awake, one hand on my growing belly, wondering if this was what my marriage would always be like. Would I always come second to Dorothy's feelings? To escape the suffocating atmosphere at home, I started spending afternoons at a local park with my sketchbook. I hadn't drawn since college, but holding a pencil felt like coming home. I sketched trees, children playing, elderly couples feeding ducks. Each drawing helped me remember who I was before marriage, before Dorothy's constant criticism made me question everything. One afternoon, I found myself drawing a woman sitting alone on a bench, looking lost and small. Only when I finished did I realize I'd drawn myself. That night, I pulled out my old art supplies from the basement storage room. Brushes, paints, canvases, everything covered in dust but still intact. Dorothy found me setting up an easel in the spare room. "What's all this mess?" she asked, wrinkling her nose at the paint smell. "I'm going to start painting again," I said, mixing colors on my palette. "It helps me relax." Dorothy snorted. "Art is a nice hobby for single women, but you have a family to think about now. You shouldn't waste time on frivolous activities." I continued painting, ignoring her commentary. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. I discovered a local art contest at the community center, Emerging Artists Showcase. The deadline was 6 weeks away, and first prize included a solo exhibition at the downtown gallery. I painted every afternoon, pouring my frustration and longing into vibrant canvases. My work depicted women in various stages of finding their voices, some trapped, others breaking free. When Dorothy saw my paintings, she laughed dismissively. "These are quite dramatic, dear. Very emotional. Perhaps you should try landscapes instead. They're more stable. Mark glanced at my work but didn't comment. His indifference hurt more than Dorothy's criticism. I submitted 3 paintings to the contest: Silenced, Breaking Point, and Freedom. Each piece represented a different stage of my journey. 2 weeks later, I received a phone call. "Congratulations, Mrs. Thompson. Your work has been selected for the showcase." I hung up, trembling with excitement. When I shared the news at dinner, Dorothy set down her fork with a loud clink. "I hope this doesn't interfere with your responsibilities at home." Mark offered a weak smile. "That's nice, honey." His lukewarm response deflated my joy. I realized I was completely alone in my excitement, but for the first time, that felt okay. At the showcase opening, I met Victoria Sterling, a prominent gallery owner with silver hair and sharp eyes. She studied my paintings intently while other visitors mingled with wine and cheese. "These pieces have real emotional depth," Victoria said, her voice thoughtful. "You're not just painting pretty pictures. You're telling stories." My heart raced as she continued examining my work. "Have you considered a solo exhibition? I have a space that would showcase these beautifully." I nearly dropped my wine glass. "A solo exhibition? Really?" Victoria handed me her business card, the paper thick and elegant between my fingers. "Call me next week. We'll discuss details." She moved on to other artists, leaving me stunned. I floated through the rest of the evening, accepting congratulations from strangers who understood my art better than my own family. When I arrived home, Dorothy was waiting in the living room. "How was your little art party?" she asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "Amazing," I said, unable to hide my smile. "A gallery owner wants to give me a solo exhibition." Dorothy's expression shifted to alarm. "Ella, you can't seriously be considering this. You have a baby coming." For once, her disapproval didn't dim my happiness. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into creating new pieces for the potential exhibition. Each painting grew bolder, more confident. I painted during Dorothy's afternoon naps and Mark's work hours, stealing moments of creative freedom. My art became my sanctuary, the one place Dorothy couldn't touch. When she criticized my housekeeping or questioned my pregnancy choices, I'd escape to my easel and let the emotions flow through my brush. I painted a series called Metamorphosis, women transforming from shadows into vibrant, powerful beings. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it was honest. Mark noticed my increased confidence, but seemed puzzled by it. "You're different lately," he observed one evening. "I'm becoming myself again," I replied, cleaning my brushes at the kitchen sink. Dorothy overheard and sniffed disapprovingly. "Art is making you selfish, Ella. Family should come first." But I was tired of putting everyone else's needs before my own. My baby deserved a mother who knew her own worth, not someone who disappeared to keep others comfortable. I scheduled a meeting with Victoria for the following week, my hands shaking as I dialed her number. The morning before my meeting with Victoria, Dorothy confronted me in the kitchen. Her usual sweet demeanor was replaced by cold determination. "I know about your little gallery meeting," she said, blocking my path to the coffee maker. "I think you should know something before you make a terrible mistake." My stomach clenched with dread. "What are you talking about?" Dorothy smiled, but it looked more like a grimace. "Mark's father had a gambling problem. He nearly destroyed our family with debt and lies. Mark doesn't know the full extent of it." I stared at her, confused about the connection to my art career. "If you pursue this selfish art obsession," Dorothy continued, "I'll be forced to tell Mark the truth about his father. It will devastate him, especially now with a baby coming. The threat hung between us like poison." Dorothy was using family secrets as weapons, trying to control my choices through emotional blackmail. "You wouldn't," I whispered, but I could see in her eyes that she absolutely would. "Try me," Dorothy said sweetly. "Choose wisely, dear. Your family's happiness depends on it." She walked away, leaving me shaking with rage and fear. That night, unable to sleep, I went to the basement looking for old photo albums. Instead, I found a dusty box labeled Harold's Papers in Mark's father's handwriting. Inside, I discovered a leather journal filled with Harold's thoughts about his marriage. The entries revealed a man who felt suffocated by Dorothy's controlling nature. "Dorothy means well," one entry read, "but she's slowly erasing who I am." I can't make a decision without her input. I feel like a stranger in my own life. Another entry dated just months before his death. I started gambling to feel some control, some excitement Dorothy couldn't manage. It's wrong, but it's the only thing that's mine. The final entries showed Harold's regret about the gambling, but also his deep resentment toward Dorothy's domination. He'd planned to confront her about their marriage dynamics before his heart attack. I sat on the cold basement floor, reading about a man who'd been slowly crushed by the same woman now trying to control me. Harold's words gave me strength. Dorothy had driven her own husband to destructive behavior through her need for control. I wouldn't let her do the same to me. The next morning, I confronted Dorothy while Mark was at work. I placed Harold's journal on the kitchen table between us. "I found this," I said simply. Dorothy's face went white as she recognized her late husband's handwriting. "You had no right," she began, but I cut her off. "Your husband felt suffocated by your control. He turned to gambling because it was the only area of his life you couldn't manage." My voice was steady, stronger than I'd ever heard it. Dorothy's composure cracked. "You don't understand. Harold was weak. He needed guidance." "He needed a partner, not a manager," I replied. "Just like Mark needs a wife, not another mother." Dorothy's eyes filled with tears, but they looked more like rage than sadness. "How dare you judge my marriage? You've been married 5 minutes. Long enough to recognize the same patterns," I said. "But I won't let you control my marriage like you controlled his." I stood up, leaving the journal on the table. "I'm keeping my gallery meeting. And if you threaten me again, I'll make sure Mark reads every word his father wrote." For the first time since I'd known her, Dorothy was speechless. My exhibition opened on a rainy Thursday evening. The gallery was packed with art enthusiasts, collectors, and curious locals. My paintings lined the white walls, each piece illuminated by soft spotlights. Mark and Dorothy arrived late, both looking uncomfortable. Mark wore his best suit, but seemed out of place among the artistic crowd. Dorothy's expression was carefully neutral, but I caught her studying my work with grudging interest. Victoria introduced me to several prominent collectors. Ella's work captures the universal struggle for personal identity, she told a well-dressed couple examining Breaking Point. I watched Mark's face as strangers praised my art with genuine enthusiasm. His confusion was obvious. He'd never seen me as anything more than his wife and mother-to-be. One collector approached him. "You must be so proud of your wife's talent. These pieces are extraordinary." Mark managed a weak smile and nodded. Dorothy remained silent in the corner, her arms crossed defensively. By the end of the evening, I'd sold 4 paintings and received commissions for 3 more. The local newspaper wanted to interview me for their arts section. As we drove home, Mark finally spoke. "I had no idea you were so talented." The newspaper article appeared the following Sunday with the headline, "Local Artist Finds Her Voice." The piece included a large photo of me standing beside Freedom, my most powerful painting. Mark read the article twice over breakfast, his expression shifting from surprise to something that looked like pride. "Listen to this," he said, reading aloud. "Thompson's work speaks to anyone who has ever felt their identity being slowly erased by others' expectations." Dorothy set down her coffee cup with unnecessary force. "How dramatic," she muttered. But Mark continued reading, and I saw him connecting the dots between my art and our life. The article quoted me saying, "Art saved me from disappearing completely." "Is that how you felt?" Mark asked quietly. "Like you were disappearing?" I met his eyes across the table. "Yes," I said simply. For the first time since our wedding, Mark really looked at me, not as his wife or his mother's daughter-in-law, but as a person with my own dreams and struggles. Dorothy excused herself from the table, claiming she had errands to run. Mark reached for my hand. "I'm sorry, Ella. I didn't realize." That evening, Mark and I had our first real conversation in months. We sat on our back porch while Dorothy watched television inside, finally talking honestly about our marriage. "I thought I was protecting you by supporting Mom," Mark admitted. "She's always been so sure about everything. I figured she knew better than I did about marriage and babies." I squeezed his hand. "I don't need protection from making my own mistakes. I need support in making my own choices." Mark nodded slowly. "I see that now. Your art, it's incredible, Ella. I'm proud of you." His words meant everything, but I knew we had bigger issues to address. Mark, your mother can't live with us anymore. We need space to build our own family. Mark's jaw tightened. She's trying to help with the baby. She's trying to control everything, I interrupted gently. Including you, including us. We talked until midnight, working through years of Dorothy's manipulation and Mark's learned helplessness. It was painful but necessary. The next morning, Mark told Dorothy she needed to find her own place before the baby arrived. Her reaction was explosive. "You're choosing her over your own mother," Dorothy screamed. Her careful composure finally shattered completely. "After everything I've done for you," Mark stood firm, his arm around my waist. "I'm choosing my wife and child. That's what married men do." Dorothy turned to me with pure hatred in her eyes. "This is your doing. You've poisoned him against me with your selfish art nonsense." "My art helped me find my voice," I replied calmly. "Maybe you should try finding yours instead of living through your son." Dorothy's face turned purple with rage. "I sacrificed everything for my family. I gave up my dreams, my career, everything. That was your choice," Mark said quietly. "Don't ask us to make the same sacrifice." Dorothy gathered her supporters, Mark's Aunt Helen and his cousin James, calling them with tearful stories about being abandoned in her time of need. But something unexpected happened. Instead of rallying to Dorothy's side, they began sharing their own stories of her interference and control. The family gathering Dorothy called to shame us backfired spectacularly. One by one, relatives shared stories of Dorothy's manipulation over the years. Mark's sister Patricia spoke first. "Mom, you tried to plan my entire wedding. When I refused, you told everyone I was being ungrateful and difficult." Mark's brother Thomas nodded. "You interfered in my relationship with Susan so much that she broke up with me. I didn't realize until years later that you were sabotaging us." Even Aunt Helen, Dorothy's own sister, spoke up. "Dorothy, you've been controlling people your whole life. Remember when you convinced Dad not to let me go to college because it was unfeminine?" Dorothy sat in stunned silence as decades of resentment poured out. Each story revealed the same pattern: Dorothy inserting herself into others' lives and destroying their happiness when they resisted. Mark's face grew paler with each revelation. "Mom, is this true? All of it?" Dorothy's tears were real now, but they were tears of a woman finally seeing the consequences of her actions. "I just wanted what was best for everyone," she whispered. "You wanted control," I said gently. "There's a difference." The confrontation continued for hours as family members shared decades of suppressed frustration. Dorothy had interfered in careers, relationships, and major life decisions, always claiming to know best. Mark's cousin revealed that Dorothy had convinced his parents to forbid him from pursuing music, claiming it was impractical. He'd given up his dreams and always regretted it. Patricia admitted that Dorothy had told her fiancé lies about their family's financial situation, trying to break up the engagement because she didn't think he was good enough. Thomas shared how Dorothy had manipulated his work schedule to prevent him from dating, then acted innocent when he confronted her. The pattern was clear. Dorothy destroyed anything she couldn't control, leaving a trail of broken dreams and damaged relationships. Mark looked at his mother with new eyes. "How could you do this to your own family?" Dorothy's response was predictable. "Everything I did was out of love. I was protecting all of you from making mistakes." "You were protecting yourself from losing control," I said firmly. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the truth. Dorothy had spent decades manipulating her family, and we'd all finally found the courage to call her out. In the aftermath of the family confrontation, Dorothy's world crumbled. Her children and relatives began setting firm boundaries, refusing to tolerate her manipulation anymore. Mark was devastated, but determined to break the cycle. "I'm so sorry, Ella," he said that night. "I see it all now. How she controlled Dad, how she tried to control you, how she's been controlling me my whole life." We spent weeks in counseling, learning to communicate without Dorothy's interference. Mark had to unlearn 30 years of seeking his mother's approval for every decision. Dorothy moved into a senior living community, claiming we'd abandoned her. But for the first time, her guilt trips didn't work. The family had seen through her manipulation. I painted a new series called Liberation, showing women and families breaking free from toxic cycles. The paintings sold immediately. My baby kicked strongly as I worked, and I whispered promises to protect them from ever feeling voiceless or controlled. Mark and I grew closer than ever, finally building the partnership we should have had from the beginning. 6 months later, I gave birth to a healthy daughter we named Hope. As I held her in the Black hospital, I felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. Dorothy visited once, holding Hope awkwardly while making subtle criticisms about the nursery temperature and my breastfeeding schedule. But her words bounced off me harmlessly now. "She's beautiful," Dorothy said, her voice softer than usual. "Yes, she is," I replied confidently. "And she'll grow up knowing her own worth." My art career flourished. Victoria scheduled 3 more exhibitions, and a major magazine featured my work in an article about artists who find their voices later in life. Mark became my biggest supporter, proudly telling everyone about his incredibly talented wife. He'd learned to see me as a complete person, not just an extension of his family. Dorothy eventually found her own life in the senior community, joining a book club and making friends who didn't know her history of control. Sometimes I wondered if she finally understood the damage she'd caused, but it no longer mattered. I'd found my voice, my strength, and my freedom. As I rocked Hope to sleep, I promised her she'd never have to fight for her right to be herself. The twist? Dorothy's attempt to control my marriage had actually freed me to become who I was always meant to be.